Every single day, somewhere in America, someone buys a Ford F-15. Oh, not once in a while, not sometimes, every single day. In 2024 alone, Ford sold 765,649 F-Series trucks, one truck every 41 seconds, for an entire year. Without stopping, the F-Series has been the best-selling vehicle in America for 43 consecutive years. Not the best-selling truck, the best-selling vehicle of any kind, any brand, anything. Tesla, Toyota, Honda, Chevrolet, none of them come close. For 43 years, nobody has beaten Ford, not once. And right now, while you watch this video, someone just bought another one. Ford Motor Company is worth over $40 billion today. It has factories on 6 continents. Its cars run in almost every country in the world. But here's what nobody talks about. The man who built this empire failed twice. Before anyone had ever heard his name, he lost everything. Twice. Was fired by his own investors. Twice. And the third time, he changed the world forever. This is how the empire began. Before we dive in, if you're new here, this channel is dedicated to uncovering the real origin stories of the world's greatest empires. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one. Now, let's go back to 1863. July 30th, 1863, a farm in a region we now call Dearborn in the state of Michigan. No electricity, no running water, no paved roads. William Ford, an Irish immigrant who came to America with nothing, woke up before sunrise every single day to work his land. Alongside his wife Mary, they raised 6 children with the sweat of their hands. The oldest one was named Henry Ford. Nobody on that farm, on that day, could have ever imagined what that name would one day mean to the world. Henry grew up like any boy of that era. He woke up early, worked with his hands, went to a one-room school with kids of all ages mixed together. But Henry had a problem. He couldn't stop taking things apart. Tools, machine parts, any mechanism that fell into his hands, he examined every detail with an almost obsessive curiosity, took it apart piece by piece, studied every gear, and put it back together just to understand how it worked. But it was on one specific day, when Henry was 12 years old, that everything changed. His father William came home with a gift, a pocket watch. Henry held the watch in his hands, watched the hands move, put it up close to his ear, and listened to the mechanical ticking inside. And then, with the calm of someone who already knew exactly what he was doing, he took the watch completely apart, piece by piece, spring by spring, gear by gear, everything laid out on the farm table, and put it back together. The watch worked perfectly. Word spread quickly among the neighbors, and they started bringing their broken watches to young Henry to fix. It was Henry Ford's first business, at 12 years old. But Henry's life changed forever when he was 13 years old. On a school trip to one of Detroit's companies, Henry saw a steam engine running for the very first time. He stopped, completely still, staring at that machine for long minutes while the other students kept walking. From that moment on, his passion for mechanics turned into an obsession. By the age of 15, Henry had already built his own steam engine inside the farm. But then, his world fell apart. His mother, Mary, fell suddenly ill and died. Henry was 13 years old. He would say years later with a heavy heart, "I never really liked the farm. What I loved was my mother, who lived there." With her death, the farm stopped being a home and became just a place full of painful memories. Henry Ford needed to leave. December 1879. Henry is 16 years old. He packs his few belongings against his father's wishes and heads on foot toward Detroit. In an era when the only means of transportation were trains or horse-drawn carriages, and automobiles were luxury toys for the rich. A 16-year-old boy was walking toward the future. His first job at a streetcar factory lasted only a few days. He soon landed an apprentice position at a shop called James Flower & Brothers. The salary was $2.60 a week. It wasn't enough to pay rent, so Henry did what every great entrepreneur does when there isn't enough money. He got a second job. At night, after a full day at the workshop, Henry worked 6 more hours as a jeweler, cleaning and repairing watches 6 days a week for $3 a week, 2 jobs, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And still, in the few free moments he had, he studied mechanics. Henry Ford didn't rest, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. 1882. Henry returns to Michigan. His father had acquired a portable steam engine that had become popular among farmers in the region. Henry dedicated himself completely to that machine. He became so skilled that neighbors paid him to operate it. Henry's reputation as a talented mechanic spread across all of Michigan and reached the ears of a representative of the Westinghouse Engine Company in New York, who hired him immediately. Henry Ford was 19 years old and was already famous across the entire state for fixing machines. December 31st, 1885, a New Year's Eve party. Henry Ford, a 22-year-old mechanic, walks into the hall and sees a young woman named Clara Jane Bryant. He fell in love right then and there. They got engaged the following year and married in 1888 as a wedding gift. Henry's father gave him 40 acres of land. Any normal farmer's son would have planted crops on that land. Henry built a workshop. Henry and Clara moved to Detroit, and it was in Detroit that Henry found something that would change everything: a gasoline engine. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. While steam engines took 30 minutes to start up and were enormous and heavy, the gasoline engine did all its combustion internally. It was compact. It was efficient. Henry fell in love immediately, but there was a problem. He didn't understand how it worked, so he did what he always did when he didn't understand something. He went to study. He applied for a position as a night engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit. Salary of $40 a month. His job was to keep the company's engines running, and in the moments when the engines operated without problems, Henry studied electricity and gasoline engines. In 1893, he was promoted to chief engineer, salary of $100 a week, and it was exactly that year that Clara gave birth to their only child, Edsel Bryant Ford. June 4th, 1896, 1:30 in the morning. After years working in secret in a garage behind his house, Henry Ford finished his first automobile. He called it the quadricycle. Basically 2 bicycles joined by a gasoline engine. It had only 2 speeds, no reverse gear, no cooling system. It was simple. It was imperfect, but it was a car. Henry was so excited to take it out of the garage that he missed one small and devastating detail. The car was wider than the garage door, so Henry grabbed an axe and knocked down part of the wall. At 4 in the morning, with a light rain falling over Detroit, Henry Ford drove his automobile through the city streets for the very first time. The few pedestrians out on the streets that night stopped and stared in disbelief. They didn't know they were looking at the future. That same year, Henry met the man who would change everything. At an Edison convention, he found himself face to face with Thomas Edison, the greatest inventor in the world, a living legend. Henry was nervous, but he explained his plans for a gasoline-powered automobile. Edison listened in silence and then slammed his fist on the table. "You have it. Keep going." 3 words from Thomas Edison. They were the fuel Henry needed to never stop again. August 19th, 1899. Henry Ford leaves the Edison Company and founds his first automotive company, the Detroit Automobile Company. Local investors put in money. Henry put in everything he had saved over years of 2 jobs and sleepless nights. And then, nothing worked as planned. The cars were expensive. The quality was inconsistent. The investors lost patience. The first model Henry created, the delivery wagon, took 6 months to finish, and only 20 units were built in 2 years. First bankruptcy. Henry Ford was dismissed by his own investors. Everything lost. But Henry looked at that failure and said something that would define who he was. Failure is only the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. And he started over to prove his cars worked. He built a race car called the Sweepstakes. and challenged champion Alexander Winton to a race in Grosse Pointe. Winton was famous. Henry was a recent failure. Henry won. The victory brought new investors, and Henry founded his second company, the Henry Ford Company. But the story repeated itself. Investors wanted popular, affordable cars. Henry wanted race cars. The fights were constant. The investors brought in another specialist to take over Henry's responsibilities. Henry Ford didn't take orders from anyone and walked out. I decided to leave, determined never again to put myself under the orders of others. Second bankruptcy, the company that remained became the Cadillac Motor Car Company. 2 failures, 2 years lost, fired by his own investors. Twice. Any normal person would have given up. Henry Ford was not a normal person. June 16, 1903, Henry Ford and 11 investors signed the incorporation papers of the Ford Motor Company. Third attempt, $28,000 total investment. Henry with 25.5% of the shares. And this time, Henry had something different. He had a mission. I will build a car for the great multitude, constructed of the best materials, by the best men to be hired, after the simplest designs that modern engineering can devise, so low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one. In those days, owning a car was a luxury exclusive to the rich. Henry wanted to change that. And he did. July 15, 1903, the first Ford car is sold. A Detroit doctor buys the Model A for $750. It was simple, it was basic, but it was the beginning of everything. But Henry was only just warming up. During a trip to Chicago, he walked into a meatpacking facility and saw something no car manufacturer had ever noticed before: the assembly line. Animals came in one side and came out processed on the other. Each worker performed only one specific function: fast, efficient, no waste. Henry Ford stared at that line and had the idea that would change the world. October 1st, 1908, Ford launches the Model T, but this time there was a secret ingredient nobody could see from the outside. During his travels, Henry had discovered a special type of steel called vanadium steel, considerably stronger than common steel and lighter. The Model T was built with this steel: stronger, lighter, cheaper to produce, and the price, $850. Just days after the launch, 15,000 orders arrived at the Ford Motor Company. The Model T quickly became the best-selling car in the United States. And there was one detail that became legendary. The Model T only came in one color, black. Customers asked for other colors. Dealers begged for variety. Henry Ford didn't care. Black paint dried faster on the assembly line, and Henry Ford had no time for feelings. With the coldness of someone who had already lost everything twice, you can have any color you want, as long as it's black. 1913, Highland Park, Michigan. Henry Ford installed the first moving assembly line in the world. Before, assembling a Model T took 12 hours and 30 minutes. After, 90 minutes. At peak production, one car rolled off the line every 24 seconds. By 1914, Ford was producing more cars than every other manufacturer in the world combined. Between 1910 and 1916, production jumped from 20,000 to nearly 1 million units a year. Half of all automobiles in the world were Fords, and every year that production increased. Henry lowered the price. The Model T that cost $850 in 1908 was being sold for less than $400 by 1916. The business world was speechless. But Henry still wasn't done surprising the world. In 1914, he announced he would pay his workers $5 a day, more than double the industry average, and reduced the working shift by 1 hour. Newspapers published editorials saying Ford was destroying the American economy, that he had lost his mind, that the company would go bankrupt within months. Henry Ford smiled, because while everyone saw generosity, he saw pure mathematics. Workers who earn more buy more. Workers who buy more buy Fords. And employee turnover, which had previously cost the company a fortune, dropped to almost zero. Mechanics from all over the country traveled to Detroit looking for work at Ford. The critics went silent. The profits exploded. Henry Ford had a clear philosophy. I believe in making 25,000 men prosperous and contented, rather than following the plan of making a few slave drivers in our establishment multimillionaires. Tired of interference from investors, Henry bought out all remaining shareholders for $105 million. The Ford Motor Company now belonged entirely to the Ford family. No investors, no board, no boss, just Henry. And then, something very dark began to emerge. Henry Ford was the most famous man in America, the most admired, the richest, and he used that power to spread something terrible. He bought a local newspaper called the Dearborn Independent and began publishing a weekly series titled The International Jew, The World's Problem. For 7 years, the newspaper published 90 anti-Semitic articles, distributed for free at every Ford dealership across the country, sent to schools and libraries. The articles were compiled into a book, translated into 16 languages, distributed around the entire world, and it reached the hands of a man in Germany. In 1923, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune walked into an office in Munich and found a large photo of Henry Ford hanging on the wall, behind the desk of Adolf Hitler. Hitler told the reporter, "I regard Ford as my inspiration." In 1925, Hitler published Mein Kampf. Henry Ford is the only American mentioned favorably in the book. Hitler calls him the only great man in America. And on July 30th, 1938, on Henry Ford's 75th birthday, Adolf Hitler sent personal congratulations and awarded Ford the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest honor Nazi Germany gave to foreigners. Ford accepted the medal, posed for photos. At the Nuremberg trials in 1946, the former leader of the Hitler Youth stated that Ford's book was the decisive book that radicalized him. That is the shadow that no Ford dealership will ever tell you about. But while darkness was spreading across Europe, Ford was building something extraordinary in the United States. In 1927, after 15 million units produced in 19 years, the Model T was retired. Henry shut down the factories for 6 months, redesigned everything from scratch, and launched the Model A in a new massive factory on the banks of the River Rouge in Michigan, a facility where raw materials went in one side and finished cars came out the other. In 1932, Ford became the first company in history to cast an entire V8 engine block in a single piece. The Ford V8 was born, an engine so good it would become the most copied in the history of the automotive industry. And then came the war. World War II. Henry Ford was over 70 years old, his health deteriorating. He had suffered strokes, but the factory he built did something extraordinary. The Willow Run plant, at peak production in 1944, produced 650 B-24 bombers per month, one plane every 58 minutes. Ford built 9,000 of the 18,000 B-24s manufactured during the entire war. Practically half of the American Air Force came out of a single Ford factory. But inside the company, something was breaking. Henry Ford had become stubborn in a way that frightened even those closest to him. When Model T sales began to fall, and his son Edsel and the company's executives said it was time to launch a new model, Henry refused. For years, he refused. He truly believed the Model T was the car the world wanted and ignored everyone who said otherwise, including his own son. It was only when the sales decline became impossible to ignore that Henry finally gave in and launched the Model A in 1927. But the time lost was costly. Ford
in the late
fell to
1920s,
third place in
Ford
the American
experienced
market,
a significant
behind
sales
General
decline.
Motors, behind Chrysler. The man who had dominated the world had let stubbornness almost destroy everything he built. Edsel Ford, Henry's only son, died of cancer at just 49 years old. Henry, now 80 years old and in failing health, returned as president of the company. April 7, 1947. Henry Ford died of a cerebral hemorrhage at his mansion in Dearborn. He was 83 years old. A public viewing drew up to 5,000 people per hour In 1999, Fortune magazine named him the businessman of the century, the boy from the Michigan farm who took apart his father's pocket watch, who was fired by his own investors twice, who revolutionized how the entire world produces anything, who carried a dark shadow that stains his legacy to this day, was gone. But the empire lived on. 1948, Ford launches the F-Series truck line. Nobody imagined at that moment what this line would represent decades later. Now you already know. But before reaching the top, the empire almost completely collapsed. April 17th, 1964, World's Fair, New York. Ford launches the Mustang and triggers a collective hysteria the automotive industry had never seen before. Lines at dealerships, people sleeping outside waiting for the doors to open. A man in Texas paid the dealer to sleep inside the car in the showroom because he didn't want anyone to buy it before.
Introducing the Ford Mustang, a new kind of car for a new generation,
the biggest
born
car
to
launch
perform.
in American history. But while the Mustang was conquering the streets, Henry Ford II was furious at someone. 1963, Italy. Henry Ford II, grandson of the founder and president of the company, attempted to buy Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari negotiated for months, accepted the American terms, took Ford's money for audits and valuations, and then, at the last moment, canceled everything and publicly humiliated Ford in front of the entire world. Enzo Ferrari reportedly said that Henry Ford II was merely an accountant, that he didn't deserve to touch his brand. Henry Ford II turned red with rage and swore revenge. The project was given a simple name, GT40. The number 40 came from its 40-inch height, the minimum allowed by Le Mans rules. A car built with one single purpose: destroy Ferrari at Le Mans, 1965, first attempt. The GT40 fails, Ferrari wins. Enzo sends flowers to Ford. Henry Ford II didn't find it funny. 24 Hours of Le Mans, June 1966. Ford sent 3 GT40 Mark II cars to the circuit. Enzo Ferrari's cars were there, red, elegant, dominant. And then, in the final hours of the race, the 3 Ford GT40s overtook the Ferraris and crossed the finish line in first, second, and third place. Simultaneously, Ferrari humiliated in front of the entire world. The first American victory at Le Mans in history. Henry Ford II was there, at the finish line, with tears in his eyes. Ford won Le Mans in 1966, 1967, 1968, and 1969. 4 consecutive years. The revenge was complete. And then came 2006. Ford was dying. Billions in losses. Quality in collapse. The stock plummeted from $17 to $1.01, a drop of 94%. The internal forecast for 2006 was a loss of $17 billion. The empire Henry Ford built on his third attempt was on the verge of collapse. Bill Ford, great-grandson of Henry, made the hardest decision of his life. He hired a man who had never worked in the automotive industry, Alan Mulally, engineer from Boeing. And Mulally did something that seemed absolutely insane. He mortgaged everything Ford had: factories, equipment, patents, brands. The Ford blue oval logo itself was put up as collateral. Everything. To secure a loan of $23.6 billion. The analysts said it was madness. Until 2008 came. The global financial crisis exploded. General Motors went bankrupt, needed a government bailout. Chrysler went bankrupt, needed a government bailout. And Ford had $23.6 billion in the bank. Ford was the only American automaker to refuse government money, the only one to survive on its own. While its competitors were begging for taxpayer money, Ford was standing alone. The pride that generated across America was indescribable. In 2009, Ford reported a profit of $2.6 billion, coming out of a loss of $14.8 billion in 2008. One of the greatest financial turnarounds in American corporate history. When Alan Mulally retired in 2014, Ford had accumulated 19 consecutive profitable quarters. The stock had risen 920% from its low of $1.01. Today, the Ford F-Series sells every 41 seconds in America. 765,649 trucks in 2024. 43 consecutive years at the top. A boy on a Michigan farm who took apart his father's pocket watch, who was fired by his own investors twice, who changed how the entire world produces anything with the assembly line, who paid his workers double when everyone said it was madness, who built half the American Air Force during the World War II, who beat Ferrari 4 consecutive times at Le Mans out of pure stubbornness and rage, who carried a dark shadow that stains his legacy to this day, and whose heirs saved the empire alone when everyone else collapsed. Built something that 43 years later, nobody has been able to tear down. Which empire do you want us to uncover next? Drop it in the comments, because every empire has a beginning, and we are just getting started. If this video gave you something you didn't know before, you already know what to do. Subscribe, because next episode, we go even deeper.